Okay, we have straight up 1 o'clock, so we're going to get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar series, Navigating the Digitalized Industrial Landscape, presented by Phoenix Contact. My name is Gary Huey. I'm with Springfield Electric, and I'm your host today. Today's session, Stop the Spread of Viruses, No, It's Not COVID, continues through the industrial Internet of Things into cybersecurity. In the next hour, you will hear more about best practices, defensive measures, and considerations for creating your own cybersecurity strategy. If you were not aware, October is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Cybersecurity is important in our professional and personal lives, which extends beyond us as individuals and into our communities. Cybersecurity is a critical and important topic. Some housekeeping. We will have time at the end for question and answer session. Please type any questions you may have in the chat box. I have muted all attendees for this presentation, and you can unmute during the question and answer session if you would like to talk live at that time. To make you aware, this session is being recorded. If you would prefer to discuss any questions one-on-one, we can offline after this session. Now let's introduce the presenter. So today's presenter is Miriam Coladonato. Miriam is a lead product marketing specialist for network and security at Phoenix Contact. Miriam has 8 years of experience focusing on creating security awareness at the critical infrastructure level and assisting customers to secure industrial communications. Miriam, I hope I didn't mispronounce your last name, but please go ahead and take over.
That was great, Gary. Thank you so much for that intro. And I really like how you started the entire conversation, because now that we are working from home, that's exactly how it is. You're not just affecting yourself when you're dealing with some type of cybersecurity incident. You could also affect your entire organization or your community because of that. That's why I really like the way you kind of started that. This is me. You can see me on camera. You can see me on one of my trainings. I've been with Phoenix Contact for over 8 years, and within the entire, my entire background, it's a pretty big mix of Cisco certification, IT certifications like IBM, and the other side is also the cybersecurity side or the electrical engineering side. So that's kind of like a great mix between the IT and the OT world as we speak. This was, pre-COVID, picture of me just doing one of the very famous Idaho National Labs cybersecurity trainings. I would recommend it to everybody. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if they're hosting those right now, but if they go back and host them, it's very good training to do. But then after COVID, and if you do live in Southern California and if you see me out on the street, this is how you'll recognize me. You will pretty much just see my eyes, but that's how you recognize me from now on. Now let's get into it. What are we going to be talking about this time? We're going to be talking about the different viruses that we have seen in 2020, just give you a little bit of an update of what's going on. Attack surfaces within industrial control systems networks. What is the awareness you have to be looking for? Prevention and best practices. Governs the network, right? It's also important. It's a very big conversation that when you ask IT or OT, they're not familiar with. And what are the immediate actions that you can do right now to improve your cybersecurity posture for operational networks? Okay, so kind of let's take it down. We all know what happened, right? This year probably changed everybody's life in the entire world. Thanks to COVID, the year changed. We all wear masks now. However, we're not here to talk about COVID. We're here to talk about computer viruses, what has been going on, and specifically talking about computer viruses or cyber attacks or cyber incidents that has been happening within the industrial control system. With everybody working from home after the pandemic, and mostly you are distracted, you have kids at home, you have a home network that is set up like by a vendor. Sometimes you're just a little bit less secure at your home network than you are at your corporate network. So we have seen in 2020 a rise of phishing attacks. And within the rise of phishing attacks, it's not just phishing, right? They want something from you. It's the increase of attacks, the attacks of ransomware. So that's kind of like the virus that we have seen the most in 2020. And let me give you a couple of the numbers that I got out from one specific company. So again, keep in mind these numbers might only be tied to this specific threat awareness company or the attacks that they've been related to, but I want to bring your attention to the most attacks that have happened per industry, and it is on the manufacturing industry, which means affects the operational side a lot. Think about it as ransomware is a virus that will take ransom your computer. So your operating system, your Windows, your industrial PCs. Imagine if in a manufacturing plant that is completely taken over. There's no plant, nothing works. Now, moving on, additional numbers, of course, there's really not a lot that I'm kind of breaking ground here, but the USA numbers are always the biggest, right? For some reason, we're one of the powerhouses in the world, a great economy. So USA has been and will always continue to be one of the destinations of this type of attacks. Now, the other thing, and I really like this drawing, is it kind of relates how everybody went throughout the year, right? So we started the year before COVID on the first quarter. We didn't know what was going on, pretty stable system. And, pandemic mode hit. And, there was a little bit of a downturn because if you think about it, people that, malicious actors kind of started working from home too. And how do they do that from home without being, unaverted or just not being at their regular Starbucks, or now they're at home with their kids. The kids are not going to school. So that kind of got decreased, and then everybody kind of got that low month of April, getting back to, getting into the working from home situation with everybody else there. And then you see a little bit of a spike again on the ransomware. Then the kids went off school, so they didn't have anything to do. They were just at home. So there is downturn for the month of, June and July. And then kids are going back to school. So preparing them for making sure the Zoom work, making sure the meetings work for them. And they got together. And now this is how September is looking like. And honestly, I would like to see how the end of October and even the end of the year will look like for these ransomware types of attacks that are happening. Now, these are some of the names out of this specific list that I took out of the website, and you can see the multiple industries there: healthcare industry, universities, police departments, cities, the different cities. But the ones that I always want to focus on or pay attention on is the operational side. So a couple of the US and international ones, or the biggest ones that happen, where EWA and the CPI are both Department of Defense contractors here in the US. They provide them telecoms, they provide them radios. Like they were a victim of ransomware attacks. And then the biggest one internationally that I've known of for this year is the INA Group and the K Electric, being the biggest oil company in Croatia, and then the only power company provider in Pakistan. And then let's jump into the US. Some of these attacks, some of the ransomware even hit the companies like Honda and Mitsubishi with, loss of operationals, which means a lot of money being lost for this specific company. So ransomware is a thing, and it's going to continue to be a thing. So you can be a target. Anybody can be a target. You will not be aware, so just keep that in mind. Now, why am I bringing ransomware? What does it have to do with me? Let me just put you in a scenario. Imagine you are working from home at your computer, and you notice that your computer just seems slower than normal. Maybe you can't access, your documents or files or that were there. If you have a Windows computer, it will give you something like Windows can't open this file, or this file is not associated with an application. In a Mac, the message is almost the same thing. It's like you haven't downloaded the app for this specific file. So that's kind of like, oh, okay, I thought this file was available to me. It was just, a PowerPoint, or It was just a video that I just did, but it's not there anymore. That's kind of like one of the first things, or one of the first clues that you'll get with a ransomware. Another possibility, and this is probably the worst case scenario possibility, is like you can't access your system at all. The entire system is taken by ransom. And then maybe you call a coworker and be like, hey, I've been having these issues. Have you had these issues? And they say, yes, yeah, I've been slow, or this is happening. Or maybe this is when you realize there's something bigger going wrong. Then you see a message that confirms your fear that looks something like this, that is like, hey, you have been infected with ransomware and you need to pay $300 on Bitcoins to be able to get your computer back to normal. But this is just an example of a ransomware screen that happened back in 2017, the famous WannaCry, but there is a lot of other ones that are out there. You can just Google them and you'll find them. What to do when that actually happens? And we're here to learn, right? We're here to be a little bit more secure. That's the entire goal. So what you should be doing, first of all, is just have a more secure mindset. Because the first thing is, if you see something that doesn't look, that gives you that sense of a doubt, just don't click on it. Just do not click on it. Just don't go there. But if you were to happen, maybe it wasn't you who clicked on the link, but maybe it was your kid and you're in the same network, so the ransomware kind of just spreads through the network. You want to isolate the infection. Unplug the computers, disconnected from the wireless, so not the entire network is infected. Try to identify the infection. Obviously, at this point, you want to also, if you're working from home and this is your work computer, talk to your IT department. There are some policies that you might have to follow depending on the company. Report it to your IT, report it to your management. If it's more off on your own, like computer, even on your city, report it to the police. They have to have some type of force that deals with these type of scenarios, because they don't want the same ransomware to go to the city or to go to an official building. And then determine your options. The last thing you want to do is really pay that ransom, okay? Because even most of the times, like you hear these stories, is sometimes you don't even get the key or the files back. So I do not recommend that. Pay them. You might not even get the key back. But determine their options, try to have some type of backup available. If that happens, you can just delete your entire computer and have that backup ready to go. Again, it takes a little bit of pre-planning, but it is one of the things that you should do when ransomware is, out there like it is right now. And just plan to avoid what's going on. You have multiple people at home, multiple kids going to school online. So all of that, your significant other also working from home, it could not be you, but it could affect your laptop if they're all sitting within the same network without any type of security. So keep that in mind, train everybody at the house, and just have a security mindset. Security mindset is sort of thinking like the bad guy, right? It's just, if you see an email that seems fishy, just delete it, don't click on it. And if it's somebody that you think like a corporate leader, email them directly. Hey, did you just send me this or no? Like, delete it and just reply, create a whole new email. Phishing right now is the most used attack vector to get whatever they want. Before, most of the time, phishing was used to just steal credit card information to use your money. Now it is the other way around. They are using phishing, but to deploy ransomware. And at the end, ransomware is to get money. It's very hard, it's to disrupt an ICS system with some type of virus like a ransomware. It's very possible, but it's unlikely. So it has happened, but it's because the people is clicking on the links, right? The ransomware is not just coming to you magically. And let's talk a little bit about this. So you did click on it. How can it even get into industrial control systems? Well, industrial control systems have multiple attack surfaces, and attack surfaces, think about it as all of the points that any malicious actor can come in and try to come in. And it's just the total sum. Let's say we have about 30 in this specific graph. But then you have the attack vectors, and the attack vectors is including the people, right? You have remote vendors that maybe can easily get infected, or a website that somebody was sent to you for a firmware download could have some type of infected device. And all of this are the different attack vectors. Ransomware is one of them. One of the virus used through a phishing that it is the attack vector itself. And then, of course, the security breach, after it has been identified, this is what the security breach happened, if there is any data that got stolen or just read or analyzed, or even if you're sitting on operational some type of control. And this is what the famous Stuxnet virus did, right? It was able to control the PLC and the process itself to make those centrifuges spin out of control. Now, the most common attack vectors are always the basic ones, right? Compromised credentials, you type your passwords, you have weak or stolen passwords, right? Somebody stole them from you or from your user, and you share the same password across your Facebook and across your, your corporate access. Malicious insider, this Runtail employee, maybe somebody, I mean, there has been stories on the news that somebody actually paid somebody within a company like AT&T or Verizon to provide that malicious sector internal information for hacking purposes. Missing or poor encryption. Encryption algorithm is, what you use for your data to be not recognizable for the human eye. So if you don't have any type of encryption or it's easily decryptable, then they just see everything you type pretty much. Misconfiguration is more on the firewall side, the infrastructure, like you have the wrong configurations on the wrong devices. And then everything else that we've been talking about is like, the standard ransomware, phishing, and the distributed denial of service. But again, why are we here? We're here to learn more about cybersecurity and how to create a strategy and what are the immediate actions I can do as of right now. So keep in mind that if anybody comes to you and says, hey, if you put this little thing right there, a firewall right in front of your system, you're going to be fine. You're going to be totally secure. Just call right there because it's not true. Cybersecurity is a process. It's a strategy. It's a continuous movement. It's a wheel that just keep going and going, that it is applying the infrastructure, monitoring the infrastructure, alarms, creating alarms. And then if something were to happen, incident response, right? Respond to that specific incident. So keep that in mind. So let me give you a couple of the different strategies or best practices that you can start following if you do not know where to start. Let's start with the risk management. Risk management, it's pretty nice. It could be a little complex at the beginning, but as soon as you have all the time invested on those first 3 steps, it's very nice to just develop it from there. Risk management is just, you're going to grab, the first step is pretty much just grabbing and identifying all of the potential risks and assessing the impact of those risks if something were to happen. So you're going to grab your plant network, you're going to do a full asset inventory, you're going to categorize all of those devices by, let's say, a criticality, low risk, medium risk, high risk, and identify the risk. So depending on the firmware, some of them high risk, some of them are lower risk, and then from there determine the impact. So if PLC were impacted because of this vulnerability, it will shut down my entire plant network, versus if this operating system is just a little bit. So it's kind of understanding the risk and where to focus your security controls. And then after that, you start talking about the security controls, and it's like, okay, now if we add a firewall here, now if we adjust a couple of the things here, or monitor the operating system there, that's when you start seeing that process of creating a more secure world. I really like that drawing of what is called the criticality matrix, because people understand risk management through that drawing of criticality matrix. It just show you how the impact and the probability are tied together. So if you have devices that are low impact, it has a low probability of getting attacked, or maybe you do have a device that it will, if it has a low probability but a high impact, then that's one of the things that you want to start doing. If your device is on the high impact, high probability, that's where the security controls should be starting to focus on. Okay, so it's pretty nice to see something like that. and how easy it is to understand. Now, defense in depth. Defense in depth is also known as like castle approach, and it's nothing more than if you have your central critical systems right there in the middle, like your operational plant or specific machine or PLC, even could be like a full network or a device. You want to put multiple layers of defense or defensive controls around that specific critical asset. It's very nice to have one big firewall, like the big wall of China. But as soon as somebody is able to poke a hole, everybody can get through that hole. That is why multiple layers of different protections are better than a single monolithic one. You can be very granular, and I'm not saying that you're going to put firewall behind firewall. It's just the different things that you can add within your operational network to make you a little bit, to reduce risk and make you a little bit more strong within your cybersecurity controls. So what are the examples of these layers? And let me give you, this is a quick overview, right? The IT network is your first layer. They give you the first access out to the internet. So if you have data that you need to forward, or if you have vendors that need to come in, now that we're all remote and they need to support you somehow, you want to work with IT to make sure they control that very hot firewall, right? That everybody's trying to come in, and maybe just do a secure way. So work with them. IT has been doing security for longer than OT has. So it's one of those things that you always want to collaborate. Now you're talking, well, this is this level, industrial network security is your operational plant. You want to make sure the operational plant, so the OT, operation technology, and IT, it's fully separated. Yes, there is some type of data points that need to be passing back and forth, but everything else should be just very, very separated and isolated. Only that data being sent up or down, or maybe create what is called a DMZ in the middle for data sharing. But nothing from up, only up. What the DMZ means, or the concept of a DMZ, is just adding a middle network that allows them to get data that they need, but no go up or down between that network. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now on the zone, you already protected or separated your IT from your OT. What else can you do internally? This is where you start talking about isolation between the processes. Depending on your process, this will look different for the different industries. But maybe you can separate, a couple of the processes. So if one process is infected or had some type of cybersecurity incident, the rest of the entire plant is still there, it's still up and running. So this is where you start talking about, okay, I can use routers or industrial firewalls to isolate my system and make them a little bit more secure. And then you jump into more of the, tiny little things within a network that might be more inconvenient, but it's very important to do. Physical security. People is not really going, like external vendors are still not going, but physical security is a big thing. For example, in like remote sites, if you have like an oil and gas application or water, wastewater application, remote sites, sometimes is, it's nothing more than just opening up a cabinet and maybe just plugging in, and you have a wireless radio connection back to the main SCADA room or the office, and then you're in. So it's one of those things that physical security should be also applied. I mean, I know cameras are expensive or surveillance systems are expensive, but even just monitoring the lock of that cabinet, it's a physical security measurement. And a little bit more smart, you can add some type of sensor that is connected to the IO, and as soon as that cabinet is open, it will send you some type of message and alarm you that way. And industrial devices have that capability. It's just very inconvenient adding it to your specific application. Now the device security, and I'm talking about specific device security. So we have multiple devices on the network. We have safety systems, we have industrial PCs with like Windows or Linux or whatever else you might have on the plant, and we have the PLCs or the critical assets. All of those different things have different methods of protection. PLC you want to protect the PLC data specifically, right? The PLC, for example, protocol, Modbus. But then the operating system side of things, like a computer, you want to protect the files. You want to make sure the integrity of the files is still there. And then the critical asset itself, so this is like individual device. Overall, think about it as, how important it is patch management. It's very important, but it's very inconvenient. So it's one of those things that you want to keep in mind, and then do it whenever possible. At least I will recommend to do it on all of the network infrastructure devices like switches and like routers and firewalls that you do have in place, because that fixes bugs, that fixes vulnerabilities. That's what it's there, right? That's why you need them. Now, standards, compliances, regulations, this is everything that is kind of around policies and procedures. Internally, your IT department might have a policies and procedures in place for security, for cybersecurity. You're allowed to do this at home. You're not allowed to do this from, from the home network or from the Starbucks or from the coffee shop. You must have some type of regulations when you travel and the use of your devices. This is majority for security. But just keep in mind, there's also industrial standards or industrial focused regulations that you can follow. The most known ones, and if you're not familiar with them, are IEC 62443 and NERC CIP. So let me jump into them first of all. So NERC CIP, if you are sitting in the utility, it's actually regulated by the federal government. These rules are regulated by the federal government. Federal government named the FERC that created the NERC, that created the NERC CIP regulations, and any asset owner that is sitting within the generation and distribution side is categorized as a low, medium, or high impact. So if you're low, and it all kind of relates, and I don't know the specific numbers, but you can find them online. The numbers relate directly into the impact that you will have if your power plant or your power goes down, if you have a cyber incident. So if you have low impact into their system, then you're going to be ranked low. Then you might need to follow some of these rules, but not all of them. If you're medium, you might have to follow maybe half or a little bit more. And if you're high risk, a big power generation or distribution company might have to follow all of them. And if you take a look, it's not, as pointing back to my first message, it's not just only putting a firewall. There is a place, or one of the SIPs that will tell you you need to put an electronic security perimeter to be able to protect your systems. But overall, it's a full strategy that they have to implement within the entire network. And even there is one more coming for supply management. So understanding your vendors, understanding where the products come from, it's very important at this level too. Another one that is gaining a lot of recognition, is trending a lot within the industry, is IEC 62443. Again, it's separated a little bit different, but it is it's getting famous in the US and internationally too. It focuses on the way IT does security, but it was kind of translated for industrial control systems network. You'll see 4 different call it regulations that you have to follow, general policies and procedures, the systems themselves, and the components. So if you take a look, this is something that will apply to us, Phoenix Contact, as a manufacturer and as a vendor. Let me show you where. So for example, and we are, by the way, certified. So if you take a look at what is called IEC 62443 -2-4, which is the one that is pointing right on top, it says security program requirements for service provider. If you are a networking and security service provider or engineer service provider that will be working in some type of operational network, you want to have some type of policies and procedures in place that follow IEC 62443. Okay, so keep that in mind. And then if you jump into that last one in the component section, we manufacture components that fit within the operational side, within the infrastructure for your network, right? Industrial firewalls, industrial switches, industrial wireless technologies. So at that level is, if you take a look at the first one, IEC 62443-4-1 is a list of rules that we should be following to have secure development lifecycle for all of our products. So we need to go back to the development team and say, listen, we need to start developing products this way. And this is what the standard follows. The same thing, so the other point that goes back to the component is security requirements or security functions that a product should have for you as a user, or you should be looking for to implement within your secure network. like be able to change the password out of the box and maybe have some type of monitoring or protocols for logging and mechanisms like that will allow you to be a little bit more secure if implemented on your industrial control system. Now, who owns the network? Like if something were to happen into that industrial control system, and I'm talking about the industrial control system, if something were to happen in the industrial control system, whatever it got initiated at IT, at OT, it doesn't really matter. Who would be there? Who will own the asset? Who will have the headache? Who would own the network if something happened? The next question I want to say is, who updates the operating system? Like is IT operating the operating systems, like the Windows patch every Tuesday? Is that happening like automatically without you as an operational manager knowing about it? Have you gotten any incident because of that? Because I have seen plenty. So some of those things that are topics that you want to talk to your IT department in that are sensitive for the full process network operations. And then who will be there if something happens? Those are the questions that you always want to keep in mind to create that cybersecurity awareness. Now, security cannot be spelled without IT. They've been doing it. You want to work with them. You want to work with the policies that they've been following and then align priorities. Hey, IT's goal is to keep the services going and protect the data. They want to make sure your computer works, your phone works, your email works, and the website works, and protect the data that they're creating, protect the customer's data. Now, operational side is, first of all, safety, depending on the industry, but then also protect the process. If you're in a manufacturing plant, if you're down, you're losing thousands of dollars per hour. If you're in oil and gas, that multiplies. Like it's all of that they're looking to do. So the goals and priorities should be kind of understood between the different departments. And then just talk about interoperability or some type of integration. IT has visibility and monitoring tools that they can use that you can use as a manager, as a plant manager, to pass data to that visibility software and have more security visualization within your entire process. So for me, it's like the best of both worlds, the way you can see it. How do you start collaborating? And this is where from different experiences and different customers, this is where you kind of find the best organization purposes. So the risk management programs, you can let IT kind of guide that. They already know how to do it. And they have the active security monitoring in place. There are softwares for industrial control systems to do active security monitoring for protocols in the industrial control systems. Remember, protocols in IT are not the same protocols in OT. So maybe it could be a thing that you can do together. The cybersecurity governance, who's going to own the security policies and procedures? That should be shared because the goals and the priorities are not the same. So having a middle ground between both of them, if it started here and move across the network, is very important. The human element, you're sitting within the same network, your corporate network. You have people working from home, you have people working from their operation stations. Like, the human element is very important and is a weakest link on the security chain. So a lot of security training has to be coming from this type of scenario. Physical security is very important, but again, it has to be followed or kind of shared between probably your facilities department and IT, and then your operational side. And what can you own? It's everything within the infrastructure that is running on your plant. The network architecture, the security perimeter you can own, and even the whole security, like the example I just mentioned, protecting the operating system from any you have not tested with that specific software or that specific process that computer is running. So it's just a little bit more sensitive. Sometimes, and I've seen these scenarios happen on real life before, an IT harmless, patch that is coming and updated the firmware or updated a small thing within an operating system in the operational side, disrupted the entire network. So keep that in mind. That is something that you want to keep ownership of. This is what you want to keep ownership of. Now, I've been talking very generally, and it is very important to talk generally because it is more than one person or one manager or one even small team on operations can do. You want to make sure you have the entire buy-in of the company. Now I want to get very general, very granular, and this is the majority of the people, right, that I'm expected to see here is, what can you do right now? If you're sitting within the plant network, if you're a manager, what can you do right now that will just tie up the knot for cybersecurity, give you a better cybersecurity infrastructure? And this is kind of like the tips and tricks that you can go and do today. This is what I'm going to say is the people. People is the people within your network is the most vulnerable network, or the most vulnerable item that is sitting there, okay? They will click on links, they will bring these devices, and they will plug it into industrial control systems, and these devices carry, phones carry malware too. So if you plug it in and it is a data cable, they might be spreading that way. So there is multiple ways that you can access to people, or a malicious attacker can access people and just try to get into your network. Again, you might not be the target, but you could be a potential target because people is not paying attention. So what should you do? First thing, why don't you start training people around security and raise awareness, raise cybersecurity awareness, and why is it important? I'm pretty sure your IT department has already been doing this. And if they were not doing it before COVID, they are doing it after COVID because it's been happening. Phishing attacks are just increasing. So you want to make sure engineers' mindset are put on to doubt everything they see that seems fishy, okay, that doesn't seem right. So I always like to tie back this to, like, it's a state of mind, right, that you want to be on. So let me give you that, a little bit of the information that you want to have. This is more of like self-defense type of scenario, but your control system operators, engineer, managers, anybody that sits in the network, you always want to have them on that yellow aware mode. It's I like to call it like, think of like a cat, right? Just a cat is always on a sleeps high over the ground and at a vantage point, just in case something startles them, they can run away. Things like that, just being aware of the network, of the criticality of the network, and if something goes wrong, if a ransomware actually were to hit. And then the rest of the states, or the rest of the color mind, is more of what to do if actually something happens. So being alert if there is a threat or something, an incident, or an incident happened within IT, or somebody came in with an untrusted device and there is alerts coming at you, and then just moving into the actions. When you move down that color chain, it's because you have some type of response plan for your incident response. So who is going to be responsible and what to do, and specific roles that they're doing while that happens. So keep that in mind. That's working on the security mindset, not just for, like, self-defense or being awareness, is also for the defense of your cyber influence that you have. Now, this is one of the other things that I will always recommend to do, because it's so important, but a lot of people just don't do it, is the asset identification. And I call it a project because it takes some time. You want to ID every single device on your network. You want to do network diagrams, you want to do data flows, like it's just fully really understanding. And I'm gonna be honest with you, you might be surprised of what you have on your network. You might not be aware there's things on your network that you can find. You can do it manually, you can do it through like ARP scans. There is a lot of tools out there that you can use. I would just be very mindful that operational, process control systems are a little bit more sensitive to this type of scanning protocols or scanning tools, so keep that in mind. But do this as a first step. It's a very good project to do. Next, what do you have on your network sitting right now? Do you have an unmanaged switch sitting somewhere within your network? Do you have a managed switch sitting somewhere within your network? If you have an industrial unmanaged switch, it's easy. It's one of the things that those devices are just not secure, just sitting there to plug in and plug out. So you have the budget allocated to change, to manage, so you can have more visibility of those devices. And if not, that's fine. Maybe you have a smaller budget. You can invest on this little physical contact piece that is just literally, you can just block the cable from being just, taken out easily. I can still grab a screwdriver and take it out or break the cable, but that will give you an alarm of, hey, somebody was trying to get into this. It's very reactive. It's not proactive at all, but is at least a step towards security. In this case, physical security. It doesn't allow. The biggest thing that I've seen with this is misplugging. We have an operator and it was just an accident. Operator, changing cables, modifying cables, and accidentally they close a loop within that switch or that process or that part of the plant and created a loop of unmanaged switches. It's just created a cyber incident without even wanting it. Again, it was simple as just unplugging the cable, but this will even avoid your people doing this. Okay, so kind of just key switching those things. Now on the managed switch side, this is where you can start doing a lot more of the juiciness and more reactive security. You can, if you have ports that are not used, disable the ports, not use them at all. Or there is MAC-based security. So let's say you have an 8-port switch sitting on an industrial piece of equipment. You have a PLC, an HMI, and a couple other sensors. Well, you can make sure that only that MAC address of that device is plugged into port 1 or 2 or 3. And if somebody else tries to unplug and plug my laptop in, it's not going to be allowed. They do a communication protocol right there. What's your MAC address? It says this is my MAC. Well, you don't match the MAC that I have for security, so I'm just going to kind of disable the port, and the port will not work for that. So keep that in mind. That is something that all managed switches should have as an option, as a feature. So again, you have the features, go ahead and use them. Network redundancy is part of cybersecurity. Obviously redundancy is part of a managed switch. Having a redundant network means you have more reliability. So if something goes wrong on one part of the network, you have the redundant path to get there. And it is part of cybersecurity because redundancy is part of resiliency. You have reliability within the network. Same thing, same scenario as the unmanaged switch. Even if you have one managed switch that has redundancy enabled, and by any chance you close the loop on the rest of the unmanaged, that managed switch can take care of the loop and avoid that small incident that your own operator even caused. And the same thing that I mentioned before is they talk protocols, the same IT protocols that IT devices talk, but they talk protocols that can be, like monitoring protocols or SNMP, these alarms or logs that can be sent to the security operational room, and they can monitor an alarm depending on the things that are happening at that managed switch level. If somebody tried to plug in and it wasn't allowed, there can be an alarm or a message being sent at a specific room. And all of that can happen and give you a little bit more proactive setting. So again, this second recommendation, it's more like the next step, but at least use the features that are already embedded on the switch. WLAN security, it's the same, industrial security. You have a secure SSID. You make sure you are using a higher encryption than WPA2. Make sure you're using a long and complicated password. And we do have MAC-based filtering on WLAN devices too. What I would recommend, if you do have WLAN, industrial WLAN within your plant, you don't have to have the SSID broadcasting. You can have it hidden. So it won't broadcast that if I open my laptop, I won't see it pop up as one of the available SSID, Wi-Fi networks. It can be hidden, and only you will be allowed to talk. And using MAC-based filtering, like for example, this application photo is, you have tablets that are allocated to your operators that are allowed to see the data from that specific machine or the different machines with the plant. If they bring a home iPad, they're not allowed to talk because that has a different MAC address. That's very nice. And again, the same protocols to talk to that type of SNMP for monitoring and logs for logging mechanism. Firewalls, just like the mGuard, is actually exactly that. That's what will give you the additional security and the isolation between the plant. The firewall will serve to the filter the packets. It will not allow the traffic to go through unless you obviously have it within the firewall rules. So it isolates the plant network write processes. It monitors all the data traffic, and it supports all of those monitoring and logging mechanisms that I mentioned before. But this is where you start talking about the PLC gets protected by the data that you're allowing it to go through. So between the SCADA room and the PLC, you can put a firewall in the middle, making sure only the data that they're allowed through, that's the command for the data that it is being passed through. Nothing else is allowed. Remote sites, even if it's a radio or a cellular modem, I think the cellular modem is the most vulnerable one because you're probably connected directly to the internet. The remote site, you want to make sure you use, private APNs, or if you have remote sites, use VPNs for remote access, because that will encrypt your connection and just not open the ports on the modem. So monitor your data for usage, and they still have these protocols that allow you to see what's going on. So all of that is very important. And additionally, with devices, some of the devices, including like our Anchor, will have that remote connectivity VPN and even filter the traffic through. So if somebody on the other side, on very remote side, tried to plug in and tried to get back into the SCADA room that way, you have filtering going through that authenticated network. So again, layers of defense that you can start adding to be a little bit more resilient within your network. Now, what else? What's next? What else should I do? This are kind of like the basics, but you can never, you always have to do it. Change the password out of all of the devices. If you implement an industrial security modem into your remote assets and you don't change the password, and I find it and I just Google what's the out of the box password, it's easy enough for me to get in and change the firewall and just get into your system. I don't know, I might not know what you have, but it's easy enough to get in. We talk about patch and vulnerability management. It's very inconvenient, but it's very important. Talk your options, create a plan, and see what is possible. Test them before you patch, obviously to not disrupt the system. Enable logs and monitoring when possible. This is when you start talking or doing a little bit more of a proactive approach instead of reactive. This is when you start talking to IT. Hey, can you guys monitor our systems too, our networks too? We talk SNMP, we talk logs, and that's what they want to see. Stay informed. Devices are vulnerable. There's no one device that is not vulnerable. So within the most common or the most popular is ICS CERT. You can actually sign up for the newsletter, and they will send you, listen, this device is vulnerable to this, and this is how it gets fixed. And even the vendors themselves, nobody's perfect. We do have in Phoenix Content, we do have a page that it is a product security incident response team. And it's just listing exactly that, all of our Phoenix Contact devices that have ever been reported with that vulnerability and how to fix it or how to mitigate that vulnerability, or anybody to take advantage of that vulnerability. Now, who has the responsibility? That's a decision that as a corporate you have to make. Is it IT? Is it OT? To me, everyone has a role to play. To me, there is a perfect piece of the puzzle that it is IT and OT working together. The vendors, supply chain have to be part of that to be able to provide you with secure and developed products. And it's not that, the awareness of the training to properly, secure configurations, because you can buy a firewall from me, but if you misconfigure it, then that's still, an entry point for you. So collaboration is the key, and having people being secure, having a security mindset is very important. I gave you a couple of tips on how to get started with a couple of devices that you might already have within your plant system, but what if you want to do more of that proactive security and not being reactive? This is where we can also come in and help you with industrial security and networking services. There are companies out there, including Phoenix Contact, that can come in and help you do some type of evaluation and planning, some type of design and implementation. We can work to integrate our devices within your system and talk to your IT department and integrate the data that has to be sent to that specific device over there. All of that we can do as an engineering service company, but more for operational sites. Okay, keep that all in mind. With that, I have reached the end of my presentation, and again, I'm going to say thank you for spending this almost hour with me. I think I said it maybe 5 times throughout the entire presentation, but security is not hard. Even the little tips I gave you will improve your security posture, but it's very inconvenient. It's just people don't do it because they don't have the time. But you have the functions already within your devices. I would like to encourage everybody to connect with me on LinkedIn. I am always posting cybersecurity awareness information, and keep in mind, and Gary just said it at the beginning of the presentation, October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So we are doing a big campaign in LinkedIn, and next week we also have another big presentation that it is going to be talking about cybersecurity and cybersecurity awareness for the operational side. So if you follow that hashtag, cybersecure world, you're going to see a lot of the Phoenix Contact people with a lot of other industry experts talking about cybersecurity for operational sites. And just, I hope you connect with me. Thank you again. And Gary, you want to open it for questions?
Sure do. Thank you very much, Miriam. That was a lot of very good information. Very appreciated. Very beneficial. Springfield Electric, in partnership with Phoenix Contact, can assist you in these solutions, including the specification, design, and implementation, like you heard Miriam talk about. In closing, we appreciate you joining us this afternoon. We will be sending a follow-up email with information about what you saw today and a short survey. Your feedback is very important to us. So thank you for joining us. Please remain safe, profitable, and healthy. Goodbye, everyone.